All right. Good morning, boys and girls. We are back to the one and only Ivan. So we ended with the promise that Ivan made to Stella, and Stella's foot is not feeling very well, and they were calling for the vet because she was not feeling very well, and she was laying on a pile of hay. And so we know that Mac was going to have the vet come. So we're going to get started on Section 5, which is still life, and it's called how. The first thing we're going to do, though, is match the vocabulary words with their synonyms. Synonyms are words that mean the same. So we're looking for something that means almost the same as. So our first word is bedraggled, and bedraggled means untidy. Sullen. Sullen is gloomy. Daintily. Daintily, let me go to precisely. That's exactly. Anxious is eager. Glints is shine. And so daintily, using process of elimination, is neatly. Okay? So we're going to go down here. Okay, so in my place, Ivan notes that Mac grew sullen. So what caused Mac to feel sullen? Our multiple choice questions are, what is the present that Julia gives to Ivan that he tries to eat? When Mac tries to hit Ruby with the claw stick, what does Ruby do? The claw stick is not a very nice thing to use on an animal. The short answer, what does Mac's treatment of Ruby in A New Beginning tell us about his character? Why might he be treating Ruby in this way? So we're going to have to use clues when we are reading. It's wanting us to infer things. So we're going to have to use context clues, and we're going to have to use inferencing. How did Ivan feel about his domain at the mall when he first moved in? And how has his feelings about his domain changed over time? Remember, Ivan has been there for quite some time. So then it says a little extra. In my place, Ivan questions whether he is a human or a gorilla. Why does he wonder these things? So we're going to move on over to the book. Okay, so we're going to stop right here. I'm sorry, we're going to start right here. We stopped here on Friday. So it would be easier to promise to stop eating, to stop breathing, to stop being a gorilla. I promise, Stella, I say, I promise it on my word as a silverback. And we know the word of a silverback means a lot to Ivan. So this is where we ended up. We're gonna go back and answer those questions on the previous chapter because it ended with knowing. So we're gonna keep reading and see if we can't answer some of the questions from our previous chapter questions and then our new chapter questions. All right, so it says knowing. Before Mac, before Bob, even before Ruby, I know that Stella is gone. I know it the way you know that summer is over and winter is on its way. I just know. Stella once teased me that elephants are superior because they feel more joy and more grief than apes. Your gorilla hearts are made of ice, Ivan, she said, her eyes glintering. Ours are made of fire. Right now, I would give all of the yogurt raisins in all of the world if my heart were made of ice. So you have to take what you know and think about what's just happening. He knows that Stella's gone and why he would want his heart to be made of ice instead of the way he's feeling now. 5 men. Bob heard from a rat, a reliable source, that they tossed Stella's body into a garbage truck. It took 5 men and a forklift. So now you're going to think about the way that Ivan loves Stella and how he's feeling inside right now. Comfort. All day I try to comfort Ruby, but what can I say? that Stella had a good and happy life, that she lived as she was meant to live, that she died with those who loved her most nearby? At least the last is true. So he's saying, how can he comfort Ruby? Because did Stella have a good and happy life? And we know that she didn't. We know that she was very sad and that she lived as she was meant to live. Well, she's an elephant, and we know that elephants are supposed to be meant to be wild and not chained the way she was chained. But he does say that she died with those who loved her most. And we know that Ivan and Ruby and the dog and the little girl all loved Stella. Crying. And there's the little girl. Julia cries all evening while her father sweeps and mops and dusts and cleans the toilets. When George sees Mac, he runs to him. I can only hear a few of his words. Bet. Should have. Wrong. Mac shrugs. His shoulders droop. He leaves without a word. When George wipes the fingerprints off of my glass, his cheeks are wet. He doesn't meet my eyes. So we're using context clues. So we take what I know and we can infer here because he's wiping his, when he's wiping off the glass on the fingers, his cheeks are wet. So you have to think about what would make his cheeks wet. But he doesn't meet Ivan's eyes. So we can infer that George is crying. The one and only Ivan. When all humans have left, I send Bob to check on Ruby. How is she? I ask when he returns. She was shivering, Bob says. I tried to cover her with the hay and I told her not to worry because you were going to save her. I glare at him. You told her that? You promised Stella. Bob lowers his head. I wanted to make the kid feel better. I shouldn't have made that promise, Bob. I just wanted. I point to Stella's domain, and for a moment, it seems like I've forgotten how to breathe. I wanted to make Stella happy, I guess, but I can't save Ruby. I can't even save myself. I flop down onto my back. The cement is always cold, but tonight it hurts. Bob leaps onto my belly. You are the one and only Ivan, he says, the mighty silverback. He licks my chin, and he's not even checking for leftovers. Say it, Bob commands. I look away. Say it, Ivan. I don't answer, so Bob licks my nose until I can't stand it any longer. I am the one and only Ivan, I mutter. And don't you ever forget it, he says. And when I gaze at the food court skylight, the moon Stella loved is shrouded in clouds. Shrouded, if you use the clues here in the picture, and it's shrouded in clouds, you can see that shrouded would mean covered. Once upon a time, all night, Ruby moans and sniffles. I pace my domain. I don't want to fall asleep in case she needs something. Ivan, Bob says gently, get some sleep, please, for your sake and for mine. Bob can't sleep unless he's on my stomach. I hear a stirring. Ivan, Ruby calls. I rush to my window. Ruby, are you all right? I miss Aunt Stella, Ruby sobs. And I miss my mom and my sisters and my aunts and my cousins too. I know, I say, because it's all I can think of. Ruby sniffles. I can't sleep. Do you know any stories the way Aunt Stella did? Not really, admits. Stories were Stella's specialty. Tell me a story about when you were little, Ruby pleads. She puts her trunk between the bars. Please, Ivan? I scratch the back of my head. I don't remember things, Ruby, I admit. It's true, Bob says, trying to be helpful. Ivan has a terrible memory. He's the opposite of an elephant. Ruby lets out a long, shivery breath. Oh, well, that's okay. Night, Ivan and Bob. I listen to Ruby's soft sobs and for long, horrible minutes. Then I hear myself saying, once upon a time, there was a gorilla named Ivan. And slowly and deliberately, I try to remember. The grunt. I was born in a place people called Central Africa, in a dense rainforest, so beautiful no crayons could ever do it justice. Gorillas don't name their newborns right away the way humans do. We get to know our babies first. We wait to see hints of what might yet be. When they saw how much she loved to chase me around the forest, my parents decided on my twin sister's name, Tag. So there's the twin sister's name. And she liked to chase, so they called her Tag. Oh, how I loved to play tag with my sister. She was nimble. But when I got too close, she would leap onto my unsuspecting father. Then I would join her and we would bounce on that tolerant belly until he gave us the grunt, the rooting pig sound that meant enough. That game never got old, although my father might have disagreed. Mud. It didn't take long for my parents to find my name. All day long, every day, I made pictures. I drew on rocks and bark and my poor mother's back. I used the sap from leaves. I used the juice from fruit, but mostly I used mud. And that is why they called me Mud. To a human, mud might not sound like much, but to me, it was everything. Protector. My family, which humans call a troop, was just like any other gorilla family. There were 10 of us. My father, the silverback, my mother, and 3 other adult females, a juvenile male called a blackback, and 2 other young gorillas. Tag and I were the babies of the group. We squabbled now and then, as families will, but my father knew how to keep us in line with a simple scowl. And for the most part, we were happy to do what we were meant to do, to feed and forage and nap and play. My father was a master at leading us to the ripest fruit for one morning feast and the finest branches for the night zest. He was everything a silverback is meant to be, a guide, a teacher, a protector. And nobody could chest beat like my father. A perfect life. Gorilla babies and elephant babies and human babies are not so different, except for a gorilla baby gets to spend the day riding on his mother's back like a cowboy on a horse. It's a pretty great system from the baby's point of view. Slowly, carefully, a young gorilla begins to venture farther and farther away from the safety of his mother's arms. He learns the skills he will need as an adult. How to make a nest of branches, weaving them tightly or they will fall apart in the middle of the night. How to beat your chest, cup your palms to amplify the sound. How to go vining from tree to tree, don't let go. How to be kind, be strong, be loyal. Growing up gorilla is just like any other kind of growing up. You make mistakes, you play, you learn, you do it all over again. It was, for a while, a perfect life. The end. One day, a still day, when the hot air hummed, the humans came. Vine. After they captured my sister and me, they put us in a cramped, dark crate that smelled of urine and fear. Somehow I knew that in order to live, I had to let my old life die, but my sister could not let go of our home. It held her like a vine, stretching across the miles, comforting, strangling. We were still in our crate when she looked at me without seeing, and I knew that the vine had finally snapped. The temporary human. It was Mac who pried open the crate. Mac who bought me, and Mac who raised me like a human baby. I wore diapers, I drank from a bottle, I slept in human beds, sat in human chairs, listened while human words swarmed around me like angry bees. Mac had a wife back then. Helen was quick to laugh, but quick to anger too, especially when I broke something, which was often. Here is what I broke while I lived with Mac and Helen. 1 crib, 46 glasses, 7 lamps, 1 couch, 3 shower curtains, 3 shower curtain rods, 1 blender, 1 TV, 1 radio, 3 toes, my own. I broke the blender when I squeezed 3 tubes of toothpaste and a bottle of glue into it. I broke my toes attempting to swing from a lamp fixture on the ceiling. I broke 46 glasses. Well, it turns out there may have been many ways to break glass. Every weekend, Mac and Helen took me in their convertible to a fast food restaurant, where they ordered me French fries and a strawberry shake. Mac loved to see the expression on the cashier's face when he drove up and said, "Could I have some extra ketchup for my kid?" I went to baseball games, to the grocery store, to a movie theater, even to the circus. They didn't have a gorilla, and I rode a little motorbike and blew out candles on a birthday cake. My life as a human was a glamorous one, although my parents, traditional sorts, would not have approved. Oh, there's the one and only Ivan when he was little. Hunger. In my new life as a human, I was well tended. I ate lettuce leaves with Thousand Island Ranch and caramel apples and popcorn with butter. My belly ballooned. But hunger, like food, comes in many shapes and colors. At night, lying alone in my poo pajamas, I felt hungry for the skilled touch of the grooming friend, for a cheerful grunts of a play fight, for the easy safety of my nearby troop forging through shadows. Remember what happened to Tag, I told myself. Don't think about the jungle. Still, sometimes I lay awake wishing for the warmth of another just like me asleep in a night nest of tender praying plant leaves, prayer plant leaves. I like having sips of soda poured into my mouth like a bubbling waterfall, but every now and then I long to search for the tender stalk of an arrowroot and to feel the tease of a mango just out of reach. Still life. One day Helen came home with something large and flat, wrapped in brown paper. Look what I brought today, she said excitedly as she tore off the paper, a painting to go over the living room couch. Fruit in a bowl, Max said with a shrug. Big deal. This is fine art. It's called a still life, Helen explained, and I think it's lovely. I dashed over to examine the painting, marveling at the colors and shapes. See, said Max Blake. Ivan likes it. Ivan likes to roll up and poop and throw it at squirrels, Max said. I couldn't take my eyes off the apples and the bananas and grapes in the picture. They looked so real, so inviting, so edible. So if you think about edible and you think about apples and bananas in the picture and they look so real, so edible probably means, hopefully you're thinking, synonym would be like that you can eat it. I reached out to touch a grape and Helen slapped my hand. Bad boy, Ivan, don't touch. She jerked her thumb at Mac. Honey, go get a hammer and a nail, would you? While Mac and Helen were busy in the living room, I wandered into the kitchen. A cake covered in thick chocolate frosting sat on the counter. Oh, I like cake. Love it, in fact. But it wasn't eating I was thinking about. It was painting. The frosting peaked and dipped like waves on a tiny pond. It looked rich and gooey, dark and smooth. It looked like mud. I scooped up a handful of frosting and I scooped up another. Remember, his name was Mud when he lived in the jungle. I headed to the refrigerator door. It was perfect, an empty white waiting canvas. The frosting wasn't as easy to work with as jungle mud. It was stickier and, of course, more tempting to eat. But I kept at it. I scratched off every last bit of that frosting. I may have eaten a little cake, too. I don't remember what I was trying to paint. A banana, most likely, I suppose. I know I was going to get into trouble. But at that moment, I just didn't care. I wanted to make something, anything, the way I used to. I wanted to be an artist again. Punishment. I soon learned that humans can screech even louder than monkeys, and after that, I was never allowed in the kitchen. Babies. Back in those days, the Big Top Mall was smaller. It had a pony ride, a wooden train that bustled around the parking lot, a few bedraggled parrots, and a surly spider monkey. But when Mac bought me a baby gorilla dressed in a crisp tuxedo to the mall, everything changed. People came from far and wide to have their pictures taken with me. They bought me blocks and a toy guitar. They held me in their laps. Once I even held a baby in mine. She was small and slippery. Bubbles flowed from her lips. She squeezed my fingers. Her rear was fluffy with padding, and her legs bowed like bent twigs. I made a face. She made a face. I grunted. She grunted. I was so afraid she would fall that I squeezed her tightly, and her mother yanked her away. I wonder if my mother ever worried about dropping us. We always held on, but that's easier to do when your mother is furry. Human babies are an ugly lot, but their eyes are like our babies' eyes, too big for their faces and for the world. Beds. One day, after many weeks of loud talking, Helen packed a bag and slammed the front door and never came back. I don't know why. I never know why. The why of humans. That night, I slept with Mac in his bed. My old nests were woven of leaves and sticks and shaped like a bathtub, cool green cocoons. Mac's bed, like mine, was flat, hot, without sticks or stars. Still, he made a sleeping sound like the rumble of my father used to make when all was well, a sound from deep inside his belly. My place. Mac grew sullen. I grew bigger. I became what I was meant to be, too large for chairs, too strong for hugs, too big for a human life. I tried to stay calm, to move with dignity. I did my best to eat daintily. But humans are hard to learn, especially when you're not a human. When I saw my new domain, I was thrilled. And who wouldn't have been? It had no furniture. It had no furniture to break, no glasses to smash, no toilets to drop Mac's keys into. I even had a tire swing. I was relieved to have my own place. Somehow, I didn't realize I'd been there quite so long. Now I drink Pepsi, eat old apples, and watch reruns on TV. But many days I forgot what I am supposed to be. Am I a human? Am I a gorilla? Humans have so many words, more than they truly need. Still, they have no name for what I am. So we'll go back. We haven't gotten to what is the present that Julia gives to Ivan that he tries to eat. We haven't gotten to when Mac tries to hit Ruby with the claw stick. What does she do? What does Mac's treatment of Ruby at the beginning tell us about his character? Okay, this is what we have gotten to. How did Ivan feel about his domain at the mall when he first moved in? How have his feelings about his domain changed over time? So when we go back to our reading, this is 9,867 days. So we're just going to read a little bit more and see if you can figure out what he's trying to tell us here. Ruby is finally asleep. I watch her chest rise and fall. Bob, too, is snoring. But my mind is still racing for perhaps the first time I've been remembering. It's an odd story to remember, I have to admit. My story has a strange shape, a stunted beginning, and an endless middle. I count all of the days I've lived with humans. Gorillas count as well as anyone, although it's not a particularly useful skill to have in the wild. I've forgotten so many things, and yet I always know precisely how many days I've been in my domain. I take one of the magic markers Julia gave me. I make an X, a small one, on my painted jungle wall. I make more X's and more. I make an X for every day of my life with humans. My marks look like this. Wow, nicely done. The rest of the night, I mark the days, and when I'm done, my wall looks like this. And so on until there are 9,876 X's marched across the wall like a parade of ugly insects. It's almost morning when I hear steps. It's Mac. He has a sharp smell. He weaves as he walks. He stands next to my domain and his eyes are red. He is staring out the window at an empty parking lot. Ivan, my man, he mumbles. Ivan. He presses his forehead against the glass. We've been through a lot, you and me. We don't see Mac for 2 days. When he returns, he doesn't talk about Stella. Mac says he's anxious to teach Ruby some tricks. He says the billboard is bringing in more visitors, and he says that it's time for a new beginning. All afternoon and into the evening, Mac works with Ruby. Ruby's feet are looped with ropes so that she cannot run. A heavy chain hangs off of her neck. Mac shows her Stella's ball, her pedestal, her stool. She introduces her to Snickers. When Ruby obeys Mac, he gives her a cube of sugar or a bit of dried apple. When she doesn't, he yells and kicks at the sawdust. When Georgia and Julia arrive, Mac is still training Ruby. Julia sits on the bench and watches them. She draws a little, but mostly she keeps her eyes on Ruby. Bob watches too. He's hiding in the corner of my domain under the not tag. It's raining outside and Bob does not like to have damp feet. Ruby trudges behind Mac, her head drooping. Endless. They circle the ring. Sometimes Mac slaps her flank with his hand. Suddenly, Ruby jerks to a stop. Mac pulls the chain hard. But Ruby refuses to move. Come on, Ruby, Mac is almost pleading. What is your problem? She's exhausted, I say to myself. That's the problem. Mac groans. Idiot elephant. Idiot human, Bob mutters. Walk, Ruby, I say, although I know she's too far to hear me. Do what he says. Walk, Mac commands, now. Ruby doesn't walk. She plops her rump on the sawdust. I think maybe she's tired, Julia said. Mac wipes his forehead with the back of his hand. Yeah, I know, we're all tired. He pushes Ruby with the heel of his foot. She ignores him. George looks over into the food court where he's wiping off tables. Mac, he yells, maybe you should call it a day and close up. Mac yanks on Ruby's chain. She's anchored like a tree trunk. He pulls harder and falls to his knees. That does it, Mac says, and he brushes the sawdust off his jeans. I'm done playing around. Mac stomps off to his office, and when he returns, he's carrying a long stick. The gleaming hook of its end is almost beautiful, like a sliver of moon. It's a claw stick. Mac pokes Ruby with the sharp end. Not hard, just a touch. I can tell he wants her to see how much it can hurt. I growl low in my throat. Ruby doesn't budge. She is a gray, unmoving boulder. She closes her eyes, and for a moment I wonder if she might have fallen asleep. I'm warning you, Mac says, and he breathes out and he stares at the ceiling. Ruby makes a huffing sound. Fine, Mac says. You want to play it that way? He draws back the claw stick. No, Julia cries. I'm not going to hurt her, Mac says. I just want to get her attention. Bob snarls. Mac swings. The hook slices the air for a few inches above Ruby's head. See why you don't want to mess with me, Mac says, and he draws back the claw stick again. Now move. Ruby jerks her head, flinging her trunk towards Mac. She makes a noise that sends the sawdust scattering. It makes my glass shiver. It is the most beautiful mad I have ever heard. Ruby's trunk slaps into Mac. I don't see exactly where she strikes him. Somewhere below the stomach, I think. And I know he must be uncomfortable because Mac drops the claw stick and falls down on the ground and curls into a ball and howls like a baby. Direct hit. So we'll pause right there. Okay. What present does Julia give Ivan? We didn't do that one. When Mac tries to hit Ruby with the claw stick, what does she do? We do have that one. What does Mac's treatment of Ruby in A New Beginning tell us about his character? And why do you think he's treating Ruby this way? And then, how did Ivan feel about his domain at the mall when he first moved in? But how have his feelings about his domain changed over time? All right, so I hope you enjoyed today's reading of The One and Only Ivan. And we'll have a couple of these questions as your quiz right after this reading. Have a great day.